Welcome into Hittin Hard with Jon Chuckery here on Locked On Sports Atlanta. Today on the show, positionless is the way to go for the Falcons. Can AJ get back to elite status? And can we get a coach with an advantage on the sidelines? It's all next. It's Hittin Hard with Jon Chuckery, Locked On Sports Atlanta.
This is Hittin Hard with Jon Chuckery, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta. And it starts now.
Hittin Hard is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We ask you to subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Get the latest episodes of Hittin Hard as soon as they become available. Also, check us out on the Sirius XM app. Follow me on my personal Twitter page at JMCH316. So we keep hearing this term for the Atlanta Falcons about positionless football. And Arthur Smith, Terry Fontenot have talked about this in great detail, where when they drafted Bijan Robinson, they talked about the idea that he wasn't just going to be a running back, that he would line up all over the field, that he would be a receiver, he'd be a running back, he'd just line up in all types of different positions. Drake London in OTAs earlier this month talked about positionless football. You're not going to know where anyone's lining up. You're going to have to try to find us. And this has been the thing that this team has really preached, is the versatility aspect of it. Now, I have flashbacks to the last time I heard the word versatility, because that was a Mike Smith term, right? Remember when we drafted Rashid Hageman and that didn't work out? And we were sold on the idea of, well, he's a versatile player. He can play outside, he can play inside, and this and that, whatever. Well, frankly, he couldn't play football. So it didn't matter what position you lined him up at. You could line him up on the other team's sideline. He couldn't play football. So I hearken back to those times where I have flashbacks about, ugh. And remember when Mike Smith was fired that following year, in the press conference that Arthur Smith had, Thomas Dimitrov, or sorry, not Arthur Smith, but Arthur Blank and Thomas Dimitrov, when they had that press conference at the Blank Center, they talked about the idea where we wanted a traditional pass rusher. They wanted guys that were hybrid and different things like that. So I'm not knocking this when I say this, but look, I just want to be good, and I just want to be good in the red zone, and I just want to be efficient. I don't care if Bijan Robinson lines up at running back or cornerback or this or that. I don't care where he lines up. I don't care if he lines up on punt return. I don't care if he lines up kick. I don't care if he kicks the football. Okay, he can be Paul Hornig, and he can play halfback, quarterback, kicker, punter. I don't care. But let's just be great on offense. Let's just be great on offense. And Tyler Algier had this quote: "We have a lot of weapons. It's all the right building blocks too, and getting all the right people on the field, and just everyone ball just have everyone ball. It's nice to have, obviously, a really great offensive line, but just having the weapons to give Desmond choices, I think that's the biggest thing." And that's what it is at the end of the day, right? At the end of the day, it's about lining up all of our guys on the field and creating mismatches. And again, we have seen at times over Kyle Pitts' first couple of years that, early in his career, more than anything, he wasn't on the field in the red zone. Okay. When we're trying to become a top-tier offense, and especially a top-tier red zone offense, again, I don't care about positions, but I want to see all of our guys on the field. I don't want to see packages where we only have a couple guys on the field or a few guys on the field. I want to see London, Pitts, Algier, Robinson, Jonnu Smith, everybody that we have available on offense in the red zone. Everybody. And let's create some mismatches. So I understand the idea of positionless football. It's what their new narrative is. That's true for the defensive side of the football as well, too. Okay. That's the Caden Ellis's, that's the Troy Andersons, where they're not just inside or outside linebackers. They're here, they're there, they're up, right? We heard that about our safeties, Jalen Hawkins, Richie Grant, right? We hear this all the time. And again, I don't have a problem with what the terminology, breaks down and says and different things like that. I just want to be good. I don't care how we go about, putting everybody in the right position and things like that. And I trust Arthur Smith when he talks about the idea of having versatility in his players. Certainly they're going to do that with Bijan Robinson, that you're not just going to see him line up in the I formation or line up as a single back and, and carry the football. He's going to line up in all kinds of different places. We've seen that from Kyle Pitts. I've talked about the idea of, if they don't really have necessarily a number 2 wide receiver, would they consider moving Pitts to the outside and seeing what he can do out there? It's always a possibility. Let's see. Let's see if they can split him out wide and match him up against a cornerback where he can out physical somebody. Let's see if they do all of that kind of stuff. And I do think that Arthur Smith has the imagination to make all of this happen. Let's just hope that it all comes together, because again, at the end of the day, I don't care what positions, I don't care how we go about doing this. I just want to be a good offense. And especially as we've talked about on the podcast, I want to be a great red zone offense, not a good, not an efficient, a great red zone offense. And you can't sell me on the idea of, well, we have all these guys that can do all of these different things, and Algier and Robinson and Jonnu Smith and Pitts. Okay, then we better be elite in the red zone. We better be a team that can score 67% of the time in the red zone and score touchdowns. That's where we got to be. And if we do, then look, sky's the limit for this team, right? Now we're talking about the upper half of that. We said floor, ceiling, 7-8 wins minimum, maybe 10, 11 wins, maximum. Okay, we can be on the upper part of that floor. We can figure this all out. But certainly Arthur Smith has all of the tools at his disposal to make this thing happen. And obviously they have all of the weapons now they feel like in place. And look, at the behest of drafting some other players, right? Drafting top-tier offensive linemen, difference-making players on defense. They've drafted these guys with London and Pitts and Robinson, at maybe sacrificing, what some of these guys on defense are, where you're basically having hired guns, as Cam Jordan said yesterday. You're just hiring, having hitmen or mercenaries, I should say, that, are coming in on 1-year contracts and hoping for the best out of all of it. So again, I don't care what position everybody plays. I just want to line everybody up on the field in the red zone and score at least 67% of the time we score a touchdown in there. Show me that we can be a dominant, elite red zone team, and I'll believe what Arthur Smith is selling and what everybody's preaching about in the building. Versatility, positionless football. Just score me touchdowns at the end of the day on offense, and we'll all be good. All right, this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel is obviously America's #1 sports book. And now if you're a new customer to FanDuel, as NBA finals are taking place right now, right? We saw Denver win pretty easily, pretty comfortably last night in their first game. Now, if you're a new customer to FanDuel, you can go in and claim your no-sweat first bet, where if your first bet doesn't win, you can claim as much as $2,500 in bonus bets. I said that right. $2,500 in bonus bets. So, again, we get to game 2. Do you think Joker is going to go over his point total? Do you think the Miami Heat are going to hit a certain number of threes? Everything is available to you on the safe, secure, super easy to use FanDuel Sportsbook app. And now, like I said, if you're a new customer, you can go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/LOCKEDON and get your no sweat first bet, where you can get as much as $2,500 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon, LOCKEDON. Claim that no sweat first bet for as much as $2,500 in bonus bets. FanDuel is the official sports betting partner of the NBA. So, can AJ Terrell get himself back to elite status? So I saw the listing of the cornerbacks, right? Pro Football Focus is going through and ranking positional groups, right? And they're ranking their 3 best players for every team, ranking the quarterbacks and this, that, and the other. Desmond Ridder came in 31st in the top 32 quarterbacks. Only Anthony Richardson was behind him, right? Okay, I mean, again, it is what it is, in this point. But look, I like Pro Football Focus, so I'm a fan of what their work is. I'm a fan of doing some of these things. It's the off season, right? We have plenty of time to get into these different kinds of things, right? I mean, it's list season, as we like to say. But it is interesting. The number 1 corner they have in the NFL is Sauce Gardner going into this season. Jalen Ramsey is number 2. Remember him when we wanted to trade for him? Okay, anyway. Patrick Surtain, another guy that, might have been available to anyway. But coming in at number 12 on Pro Football Focus's top 32 cornerbacks is AJ Terrell. And I thought this was an interesting write-up that they had for him. Quote, Terrell is a great case study in the volatility of coverage and cornerback performance. His rookie season was solid before a breakout sophomore campaign that saw him play like an all-pro with an 85.6 Pro Football Focus coverage grade. In 2022, his play dropped back down to earth, and he allowed 9 touchdowns. Terrell definitely possesses the ability to be an elite cornerback, but needs to prove he can find that play again in 2023. Now, I'm one of those people that I don't believe that a really good secondary makes your pass rush great. I think that's mythology. Either you have a guy that can get home and get the quarterback on the ground, or you don't. You don't. You can, because again, in 2023 NFL football, you're not going to be able to cover everybody for a length of time. It's not 1978. 1978, let's go back to that year. For instance, you would have Bolitnikoff on one side, Cliff Branch on the other side, and then you might have Dave Casper run out in a pattern. So you had 3 guys that you had to account for, right? Today's modern NFL football, 4, 5, 6 guys that are all running around on the field and all running all kinds of the game is completely different. You don't have 2 or 3 guys. You don't have just 2 wide receivers, a tight end on the edge, and that's the 3 guys that are going to go out in pattern. And maybe, you trade your tight end for a running back that would go. It's not 1978 football anymore. You have all kinds of guys that go out in patterns, right? You have 5 guys at a time that go out in patterns. So from that standpoint, you're not going to be able to cover everybody for any length of time. If you can't get to the quarterback, you're going to have struggles. So I don't believe that a good secondary makes a good pass rush. But I do believe that if you have a team that can get home, you can make your team look better in the secondary. San Francisco 49ers come to mind. They have a great defensive line. They don't have a lot of great defensive backs on that roster. They're playing with 5th and 6th round guys and a couple of undrafted free agents because they can get away with that because their front line is so dominant, right? We talk about them being the best line of scrimmage team in the NFL. So if we can get our pass rush at some point fixed, I definitely think that AJ Terrell can get himself back up to that elite status that he was. And look, that's life of a cornerback, right? There was some realities that set in last year. He didn't play well at times. I don't think it's all his fault. And obviously, they picked on AJ Terrell. They saw something that said, okay, we can get it, AJ Terrell. Coming off of what was an outstanding sophomore season. He was he and Jalen Ramsey were the top 2 graded corners in the NFL. They had the top 2 grades of anybody in the NFL. And it looked like the sky was the limit. And there was some reality that set in last year. Do I think AJ Terrell can be an elite number 1 corner? Yes, I do. And I'm even amazed at how good AJ Terrell has been. I didn't think when I looked at that draft from 2020, I looked at the idea of, okay, I thought Okudah was the number one corner coming out of the draft. I thought Henderson out of Florida was the second best corner, and then I would have had AJ Terrell somewhere in that third, fourth best corner range. But I didn't see how well that he would play at this level. And so he's obviously been sort of a blessing in some ways, where you picked him, 16th in the draft, and he's blossomed into a top tier type of player. That's the kind of guys that help you win football games, when guys overperform even on their rookie contract from what you expect them to be. Not that the Falcons didn't think that he would be a good player, but again, I don't know that we saw top one or two corners in the NFL in AJ Terrell. And he was obviously, he's been a home run pick for this team. And I still think he's one of the three best players on the Falcons roster. But things have to change around a little bit. And if we can get this pass rush fixed, and I think with Jeff Okudah on the other side, I think with the improvements in our secondary, with Bates, with, Okudah, with Mike Hughes, guys like that we're adding more and more talent. And I think the positional group of defensive backs have increased, then I think AJ Terrell can be a guy that gets back to having that kind of season that he did in his second year versus the one that he had last year. And look, if you find something on film to exploit about AJ Terrell, every team in the league is going to try to do it. Every team is going to try to figure out a way to exploit what his weaknesses are. And I think that if we get our pass rush fixed, I think with having somebody on the other side of him, I think that there's no reason to not think that he is, or should say, I think there's no reason to think that he cannot get back up to elite status as a corner in the NFL, that he can be that top tier kind of guy. And again, we start looking around and saying, okay, if I have a top tier corner, if Ebiketie breaks out and we have a great pass, now our defense can really be something. Now our defense can really get after it, get after the quarterbacks, get after, teams, obviously not be the worst pass defense in the NFL, increase our pass rush. So I do believe that AJ Terrell is a guy who's going to get back to elite status. Maybe he won't get back up to what his sophomore season was this upcoming season, but I think that he's going to be really close. And I think with the addition of Okudah, who I think is going to be a real star and a real surprise for this team, that they have two really good cornerbacks. And maybe, again, if you can partner up AJ Terrell and Jeff Okudah for the long term and get those guys under contract for the long term, you might have something dynamic that's out there. All right, as you make Hittin' Hard your first listen every day, make sure you go into the comments section and let us know that you're an everyday listener to the program. We like to call them our everydayers. So whatever platform that you're on, leave us a comment. Let us know that you're listening in 5 days a week. So we greatly appreciate the fact that you're a part of our community and a part of our ever-growing audience. So we thank you so much for all of that. So can we get an advantage on the sidelines? So Sam Mitchell, the great Sam Mitchell, and I, former NBA Coach of the Year, used to go round and round about Eric Spoelstra. And this was 10, 11 years ago. And this was back in the LeBron James, Dwayne Wade, Chris Bosh days, where, again, he was kind of handed a silver platter that all those guys were in their prime and they were, three of the better players in the NBA. Wade and LeBron were, maybe two of the top four players in the NBA. And Sam and I would go around and I said, I didn't see the genius in Eric Spoelstra, that he was a guy that, again, was handed a silver platter. Pat Riley served it all up to him. And again, he had an easy job in all of this. Well, now fast forward a decade or so later, I think Eric Spoelstra is one of the best coaches in the entirety of the NBA. I've changed my opinion on Eric Spoelstra. Now, I had Eric Reed on the program last time, a radio show last time, and he's the longtime play-by-play voice, and literally he's been with the organization since day one. Think about that. He's been 35 years with the Miami Heat, and he's talked about and we were talking about what Eric Spoelstra means. And I do think that when Eric Spoelstra is on the court, that the Miami Heat have a coaching advantage. And I've talked about this for years with the Falcons, that the Miami Heat have a coaching advantage, that when he's on the sidelines for that team, they have the advantage at coach. And if you have a really good coach who really understands and can really figure some things out and change up things in the game to influence it to come out on the winning side, then you've got something special. And the Miami Heat have been overachievers in a lot of ways. Look, they beat the number 1 seed in Milwaukee, the number 2 seed in Boston, when nobody had them doing all of that. And yes, they were an underachieving team during the regular season. So they went from number 1 seed to number 8 seed. They now are in the NBA Finals with a definite chance to maybe win the NBA championship. I mean, I think it's going to be a hard-fought series between them and Denver, but anything's possible, right? Can we have that advantage? Is Quin Snyder going to be the guy that gives us that advantage? Obviously, maybe Mike Budenholzer was the last guy, and maybe he's the last guy since Mike Fratello, where we felt like we had an advantage on the sidelines with the Atlanta Hawks. Again, not knocking some of the coaches that we've had. Well, maybe I am a little bit, but we haven't been able to out-coach anybody. We haven't been able to out-scheme anybody. We haven't been able to have a difference maker on the sidelines that you look at and say, wow, that guy gives us an advantage night in, night out, 82 nights a year. Wow, we've got a guy that is one of the better coaches and more imaginative coaches and one of the more offensive-minded coaches in the NBA. And that's what I'm hoping for Quin Snyder. You know, I've said this for years about the Falcons, that for so long, let's go back to the Dan Quinn era. You know, I never really thought that we had an advantage at the coaching position in the Dan Quinn era, even though we had a lot of talent and we had success in 2016, 2017. I never felt like we had the advantage on the sidelines. I always thought that we were getting out-coached and out-schemed, and we didn't adjust very well, and we didn't make second half adjustments. For years under Dan, we were one of the worst third quarter offenses and third quarter defenses, giving up the most points. We just didn't adjust coming out of half times. Now I think that we have a guy in Quin Snyder who now we can have an advantage on the sidelines. And that's an underrated thing. Jimmy Butler is the ultimate winner in the NBA. Eric Spoelstra is one of the top tier coaches in the NBA. And because of all of that, they feel like that they're in every game. They feel like they can will themselves to win. That's what I want from Quin Snyder. I want him to have our star player and he get on the same page and make everything happen. And look, they were 10-11 under Quin Snyder. Okay. That's obviously got to be a lot better in the first 21 games of the year coming up. I don't know what the record needs to be, but it doesn't need to be 10-11 or we're back to floundering around. And they've paid Quin Snyder like a championship caliber coach. He's in that ballpark of Spoelstra, Doc Rivers, Nick Nurse, Budenholzer. Like, he's in that realm. And of that boys club, he's the only guy that doesn't have the NBA championship to go along with it. Spoelstra does, Budenholzer does, Doc Rivers does, Steve Kerr does, like Nick Nurse does. Like, all of those guys have their championship ring. And that's what I hope for with the Hawks. But it starts with having the advantage on the sidelines, having an advantage in the coaching position. And that's what the Miami Heat have. They may not have the most talented roster, right? They may not have all first team all NBAers all up and down the roster. Jimmy Butler was second team all NBA this year. You know, he's never reached a level that high before in his NBA career. He's been a third team all NBA player several times, but he's never been a second or first team all NBA player. But they find a way to get it done. And they have a big advantage in the coaching position. That's what I want for the Hawks. I want to know, and I think Arthur Smith gives us the same opportunity now, that when we line up on the sidelines, we have the coaching staff that can outmaneuver what the other guys on the other sideline has. And I think that's the thing about Quin Snyder. We know that he's an offensive-minded guy. He certainly has built good defensive teams. We know that he's got one of the sharpest minds in all of the NBA. Now I want to see the results come. Now again, as I always like to joke, okay, don't tell me how to make the watch. Just tell me what time it is. Don't show me the labor pains. Just give me the baby. All right. Now we have to get the results for it. And I think Quin Snyder gives us a real advantage that most nights when we line up on the sidelines, that we've got a guy who can get it done, adjust, and make it happen to where we can win ball games moving forward. All right, thank you so much for making Hittin' Hard with Jon Chuckery your first listen. Be sure to go in and leave us a comment that you're an everyday listener. We like to call them our everydayers, that you listen in 5 days a week to the program. So let us know on whatever podcast platform that you're listening on. Go in the comments section. Leave us a note that you're an everydayer, as we like to call them. We thank you so much for being a part of our ever-growing community. You can check us out on YouTube or follow us for free on wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Get the latest episodes of Hittin' Hard as soon as they become available. Check us out on the SiriusXM app as well. Follow me on my Twitter page at JMCH316. Back with you on Monday. This has been Hittin' Hard with Jon Chuckery, Locked on Sports Atlanta.